mechanisms that he uses to bring people's awareness and alertness back to him. And sometimes in the even with such difficult things that God allows, um, people don't often wake up. And so I wanted to read Amos chapter 4, and we'll start just in verse number 6. It says, "And I also have given you cleanness of teeth in all your cities, and want of bread in all your places, yet ye have not returned unto me, saith the Lord." So the first thing he says here, listen, the reason your teeth are clean is because you got nothing to eat, right? And so, I've given you famine. He adds that about the drink, the water next. He says, "And also I've withholden the rain from you, that there is yet 3 months to the harvest. And I caused it to rain upon one city, and caused it not to rain upon another city. One piece was rained upon, and the piece whereon it rained not withered. So 2 or 3 cities wandered unto one city to drink water, but they were not satisfied. Yet have ye not returned unto me, saith the Lord." He says, "I have smitten you with blasting and mildew when your gardens and your vineyards and your fig trees and your olive trees increased. The palmer worm devoured them. Yet have ye not returned unto me, saith the Lord. I have sent among you the pestilence after the manner of Egypt. Your young men have I slain with the sword, and have taken away the horses, and I have made the stink of your camps to come up under your nostrils. Yet have ye not returned unto me, saith the Lord. I have overthrown some of you, as God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, and ye were as a firebrand plucked out of the burning. Yet have ye not returned unto me, saith the Lord. Therefore, thus will I do unto thee, O Israel, because I will do this unto thee. Prepare to meet thy God, O Israel." And so we see there that even in the midst of devastating calamities that are taking place to wake up the people, we see here that they did not return unto the Lord. And so the point I want to bring out and throw out to you guys, and obviously, no matter how things start, God can get the glory out of it. And so how does a Christian respond today to this virus? How does a church respond in light of how the community is responding? So what are you guys' thoughts on what is the proper response that a Christian should be looking at, and what is the balanced response, I guess should say?
Well, before we get into the response, I wanted to point out how interesting it is that even during the tribulation, when fire is raining down from heaven and all this is happening, people are still not going to return to God. Yeah. They're not going to seek His face.
Right.
Yeah. So it's happening in just a minor way right now with this ridiculous virus, and people aren't seeking God's face. I haven't seen anybody seeking God's face.
Right. I saw a video this morning of a guy walking through the streets of New Orleans preaching, and he put on sackcloth, and he is literally walking down the street of New Orleans, and he is preaching. He's quoting scripture, and it's eerie because all the streets are empty. It's pretty neat. So I just point that out, Brother Al.
Oh yeah, and I agree. And when we look at this and the way Christians react, I think first and foremost, I think God's desires for His people to humble themselves and pray.
Yeah,
yes. Like we see in 2 Chronicles 7:14, and along with that, we pray to get our own hearts right with God, and then we're in a position we can pray for our communities around us. Because, if we look at this situation with the virus, and if it's as bad as the people who think we're all going to die are, certainly we need to pray. But even if there's really nothing to it, a lot of people believe there is something to it, and we need to pray for them.
Yeah. You know what I would say? We should pray for people's intestinal fortitude.
Yeah.
Because it's been amazing how fast churches have buckled under this. I mean, there's not an edict, as far as I know, from President Trump that churches can't meet.
No.
And yet they're not.
Well, and that reminded me when you said that, when Paul asked people to pray for him, that he would have the boldness to do what? To be able to continue to speak, to continue to be a witness.
Yes.
And I think we need to pray for our pastors and our churches.
Yes.
Because like you said, nobody, at least in Ohio even, if you read the governor's order on page 5 of his order, churches are exempted. We're considered essential, businesses, necessary. And I've interacted with some people who believe that this is all a plot to shut up the churches. But I'm thinking, wait a minute, they're going out of their way to tell churches, you can meet.
Yeah, and I want to throw something in there too is, we jump from the Christian's response to the church's response, but this is exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, the reality is there is a disease.
Yeah.
There is. I mean,
the
it's
question
there.
is how serious.
Absolutely.
But it is
and,
there.
And certain areas absolutely are getting hit harder.
New York City,
around the world, absolutely. But this is my exact point is, okay, well, and you said pray for the pastors. Obviously, you're a pastor yourself.
Yeah,
I know
you as well.
You've struggled with it. You've dealt with this issue, and both you and I, we have kind of smaller works in that sense, so it may not be as impactful. But how does the average church member look at this and say, okay, do we listen to the recommendations of, apparently qualified people? Do we follow the recommendation of our apparently qualified pastor? And if there's in conflict, how do I do this? How do I, what is best? I think we talked a little bit about it the other day on the phone was, the governor, I believe, has done everything he can to maintain religious liberty for people to meet.
And that's not the case in all places, because I was seeing in Colorado they were going after churches that were
Virginia too. Virginia just did too.
And you bring up a good point, because there are people who are going to take advantage of this, and we do need to keep it in perspective because it has potential. But we deal with the flu every year too, and there's already been over 115,000 people in the world that have died so far with the flu this year, as opposed to a little over 25,000 deaths from the Chinese COVID-19 virus.
I think we need to pray for the discernment of the pastors. We absolutely need to pray for pastors, but to have discernment, not just from pastors, but from everybody, but especially pastors, because right now when you hear Dr. Amy Acton on the press, the presser every single day, good grief, with these doom and gloom numbers, and then they turn out after there's a little space of time that they're really not correct. And the numbers that she trots out never include the recovery, just to use round numbers. If there's 100 people sick, and she says then the next day there's 200 people sick, but she doesn't include the fact that 80 people got better, then there's only 20 people sick. And so the way she presents it, the numbers continue to rise endlessly and will never shrink down because she doesn't include anybody getting better. And so there needs to be a little bit of discernment. And I mean, I hate to say it, but she's a left-wing activist, and we've learned in the past. She's worked for Obama's campaign. She's fundraised for Planned Parenthood. As we've learned from the past, far left-wing activists don't have any problem hurting the country. I mean, I hate to say that to label somebody that's in a position of authority like that, but I mean, we need discernment, and this has been proven to be the case in times past.
So let me ask you this question. I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. So because somebody's a left-wing activist, does that mean everything that they say is invalid?
No, but it does mean they have
an agenda.
An agenda, exactly. That's a great way to put it. An agenda. And we've seen this over and over and over. I mean, nobody would doubt that President Obama was less involved in helping the country than President Trump.
So would we say then that President Trump has gone along with many of the recommendations of the federal government as far as the CDC and has input and impact into that and has implemented, he went more stringent to say, hey, we shouldn't be in gatherings of more than 10 people. The governor originally said 50 people, and he went to the 10. Yeah. And so again, on the flip side of that, what is his agenda then?
Well, he wasn't making commands. She's made edicts.
Yeah, she's actually issued orders.
Yes, orders.
Where she's ordered, the primary last week. Yeah. It was not canceled by the governor. It was canceled by Dr. Acton,
right,
an unelected appointed official,
of which President Trump recommended that should not happen, and she did it anyway.
And we get into the reasons, or how they should have done it, but I do think, and like you're talking about President Trump, he's trying to balance on the one hand what the medical community is telling him, and on the other hand, his tweet that a lot of people criticized, where he said in 15 days we need to reevaluate where we're going. Because basically he's looking at the idea we don't want the cure to kill the patient.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like treating cancer. You give somebody radiation or chemotherapy,
Yeah.
and you can only take them so far. My dad had cancer. He had radiation treatments. He was supposed to have 12. At number 5, they stopped it because they said they didn't think he'd survive number 6.
There's the unintended consequences.
Exactly.
I was joking about the Cheesecake Factory and
Yeah,
better use
that's a
better use the
consequence.
gift certificate
So,
before they go belly up.
but what happens to the servers that work there?
Right.
The bus boys and
is exactly right. But even larger than that, the
Mhm.
unintended consequences we're starting to see now are suicides.
yes,
And people literally going
Yes.
crazy with mental health
Mhm.
issues, and the abuse in the family from husbands and beating on wives because they're getting literally terrified.
yeah,
I mean, these are horrible unintended consequences that Trump was pointing out may end up being worse than the problem to
Yes.
begin with.
And President Trump has already come out and said we
Mhm.
should be taking this like on a county by county basis, looking at the areas
Right.
that are really hard hit
Mhm.
and maybe locking them down, but the other areas that are not, they should be able to go back to the right.
And bringing back to President Trump, I think that's what you said he's doing. He's trying to balance between
Mhm.
what he believes and the medical community. And he's getting spiritual advice and he's getting medical advice. And I think that's what every pastor is doing.
yeah.
Every pastor is saying, I don't have a medical degree. And so there's some element. I go to a doctor. I don't question my doctor. I don't say I go in there with blind ignorance, but if I go to a doctor, I want him to tell me, hey, what's wrong? What do I need to do to fix it? And there's a point in which you have to make a decision and say, I'm going to put an element of trust in them because they have much more knowledge in that area. And I think that's what the president does. And again, I think that's what most pastors. I know I certainly have been watching the medical things and having to discern between, Dr. Amy Acton or Dr. Fauci, I think is how they pronounce him,
Right.
and others, in the area that have spoken out or doing press conferences, and you're just trying to get a handle on it. And the balance that I always come back to is, well, I have my faith in Christ, so it really doesn't matter what goes on around me. We'll be able to deal with it. If a national lockdown comes for whatever reason, we'll be able to deal with it because we'll have the Lord is going to be with us. And again, but I'm just saying that's part of the pastor's what his discernment that he's trying to discern is, okay, what is the medical urgency versus what is the essential for the spiritual side. Surprisingly, I don't think I've ever agreed with Steven Anderson before in my life. And I thought this morning, I was like this. I'm like, I wonder what Steven Anderson says about this. And he surprised me. He's like, listen, this thing is real. I think there's an epidemic that's coming. I don't think it's going to be here in Arizona or other places, but the reality is, he said, we need to be gracious towards those with differing opinions.
Steven Anderson.
I know that. I was like, well, miracles are happening here.
You should let our listeners know who Steven Anderson is.
Man, he is.
A lot of people don't know who he is.
Well, they probably do if they listen to mine.
They're
But
better off not.
we disagree with a lot of stuff. He's a post-tribber. He is anti-Israel.
Oh,
he's
yes.
And he's an independent fundamental Baptist, soul-winning, King James only. We got a lot of issues, but it came up on my YouTube. I said, I wonder what he says, and quite surprising. But I didn't listen to anything else. I just listened to that part. But again, my point being is, it's a difficult spot. So, when we have all been affiliated at some point somehow with Cleveland Baptist Church. I know you guys are members there, and so when that news came down, I'm thinking, man, there's a church of 1,500 people. That's a big decision. I'm making a decision based off 50 or 60 people, and that's a whole different ballgame. And then we got schools, they've got nurseries, they've got I mean, oh God, I thought about you guys. I thought, man, if the hotel shuts down,
that was our biggest concern really, was the hotel, because we're there are some hotels that have shut down, and we don't have our own building, so we're kind of at the mercy of the hotel. But so far they're staying open, so we're staying open, but we're a much smaller church. A number of our older people are not coming right now. And that also brings up another thing. We're talking about how Christians and churches should be reacting. I do think that we should be encouraging members that are ill or that have respiratory problems like COPD or something like that, or even diabetes or anything that challenges the immune system. They should be self-quarantining. And that's even good just for the pneumonia. cases
Yeah.
that are out there.
Right.
Or not pneumonia, I meant
The
influenza.
flu, yeah.
The flu. And so all these things that are being put in place will reduce the incidence of flu. Flu can lead to pneumonia and things, which cause people to die.
You know, you bring up pneumonia. It still kills more people every day than this coronavirus.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And we'll be talking about that more when we get into our program at 1:30
Yeah.
on some of the reasons for the inordinate fear, I guess you could say,
Mhm.
and trying to balance some of that out as well. But yeah, I do think we should be looking at things, like you said, on a county by county basis, church by church basis.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah, you got a lot of churches out in rural areas
Mhm.
that, there's probably I think we were talking about somebody in Montana in a different state. They nowhere, nothing even there. I heard James Pranger over there. I think your preacher was talking about this. James Pranger he says closest case is 2,000 miles away over in Russia.
Yeah.
And so the reality is, it's difficult when you have just one thing come down. And covers the whole blanket thing. But the reality is, again, what I think people are struggling with is, okay, there's not an edict that says churches cannot gather, but does the church have a responsibility? The churches have a responsibility. Like we're in Lakewood. Lakewood's got one of the higher. They just put the county thing out today. Lakewood's got a few more than the other areas. Granted, it's not as in numbers against flu or whatever is not as high, but obviously. We're in a close confined 50,000 people
Very
and
close together.
everyone's
Yeah.
stacked on top of each other. And so, you have to make decisions based on that. New York City, I mean, there's some that, what are you going to do? I mean, it's, you can't even go into some of the parts of the area. It's so overwhelmed. And so I think, again, the balance is grace and truth, right? I mean, that's what Jesus was full of. And it comes down to our church. I would encourage people who disagree with their pastor to pray for their pastor, encourage their pastor, uplift their pastor, love their pastor, and understand that it is a difficult spot. When we were here last Friday, I think it was last Friday, man, the world's changed in a week. I can't remember time.
Every day.
We were planning on having service, but I went in Saturday morning. We were getting ready to do outreach, and 3 calls came in, like boom, boom, boom. One of them, we're really sure we have it. The other one, I'm pretty sure I have it. The other one, I'm in quarantine. Somebody at my work's got it. And I thought, okay, Lord, I've been praying about it anyway. And so we just made the decision to go ahead and close the doors at this point. Now we only got a couple minutes left. I hope that you'll stick with us, because we're all going to stay together and come back during Pastor Al's show right after the break. But let me just mention this. We've joined the dark side, Brother Al. We have a Facebook page now. We've gone to the dark side.
Welcome.
And so
been assimilated.
there it is. So you can go to facebook.com / North Coast Baptist Church, and you can watch our live stream. We're on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, Sunday night at 6, and Wednesdays at 7. And so we are live streaming all of those. Also, for those who are listening, who are maybe our members, you can go to our website, and there's a PayPal donation button there to keep up on your givings. And certainly don't want to rob you of any blessings of giving to the Lord. And certainly we get to keep the lights on too. So there's a double benefit there. So again, you can reach out, or you can watch us on Facebook Live. Hopefully it's temporary. We're hoping to get back here real soon, in a week or two, and hopefully everything get back a little bit back to normal. But I thank you so much for listening. I hope you stay tuned. We'll be back with you after the break, and we're going to continue on our discussion about the coronavirus. So we'll see you after the break. Okay.
Oh, this is still broadcasting right here.
So I got to be good.
In that. That's picking up. So now you want to tell us? No, I was going to ask you about your Vegas.
Man, I pulled the slot. No, I'm just kidding.
See, this is on YouTube now. See, it's going out for everybody. Well, God bless. Stay tuned. We're going to start up the YouTube stream in just a few more minutes at about 1:30 or so, and we're going to continue our discussion on the Chinese coronavirus pandemic and panic. So God bless. All right. Get your advertisement if you're on YouTube.
Oh, you're awesome. Oh, you're stipend there.
if they can hear it.
He's too old.
Well, actually, he might not hear it because I'm using the thing here.